Well, good evening, everybody. As we begin this meeting, I'll ask everyone to please silence cell phones and other electronic devices and remind council that our procedure by law prescribes the use of electronic devices during council meetings. It is 6:31 p.m. and I will call this council meeting to order. And I will do so with a territorial land acknowledgement. Land acknowledgement is an act that predates European settlement as well, and was an opportunity for visiting indigenous nations to acknowledge the land that they were visiting and seeking opportunities on. In Brighton, we acknowledge that we are meeting this evening on territory that is the traditional territory of the Mississauga, Anishinaabe, now of Alderville. We are grateful for the opportunities that the lands and waters that we now know as Brighton provide for us, and work to set policies that will help us work to be better stewards of this place. We are grateful to Indigenous neighbors who continue to work to make this place sustainable for all creation. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, second by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council approve the May 20th, 2025 Council agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Members of council have any declarations of interest, and if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. Are there any announcements this evening? Councillor Wilden.
Just a reminder to everyone that next week is Accessibility Awareness Week, which will be capped off by an event here in Brighton at Memorial Park on Friday at 11 o'clock, 11 to 1. We're going to have some information there about accessibility. Some of the events that I know Councillor Wright has participated in the past, helping us gain some perspective on what it's like to live with disabilities, and some general information about our responsibilities to be an accessible community. So please come on out.
Thank you for that. Any other announcements? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week, a number of our municipal staff and a few of our council members participated in Bowling for Kids in support of Big Brothers and Big Sisters. I'm not sure exactly how much money was raised, but speaking to the organizer, they have much succeeded their goal for this area this year. Good. And we had a lot of fun.
I saw the Facebook picture. You look like you were having fun. Any other announcements? I was not able to attend the bowling event as I was at the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative Conference, which is a good association, a group of like-minded communities around the Great Lakes on both sides of the border and throughout the St. Lawrence, both talking about environmental and sustainability issues, but also about how to drive local economy using the blue-green space that we think of as the Great Lakes St. Lawrence. It was in Milwaukee, and I'm pleased to say that our American neighbors and friends were equally angered by the concerns that we're all experiencing. And in their words, one needs not to disrupt an $8 trillion economy for no reason at all. And I think we all echo those statements. So good conference, good camaraderie, and next year it's in Hamilton, so much closer. Final chance for announcements. That brings us to the adoption of the minutes with a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council adopt the May 5th, 2025 meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council adopt the May 12th, 2025 Council Planning meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. I should note that Councillor Butwell did note that she would be away this week. We weren't sure if she'd be able to join us by virtual means. It would appear not, but Jessica continues to monitor that. So if she's available, we will have her chime in. We have no statutory public meeting. We have no delegations or presentations. Madam Deputy Clerk, are there any citizens' comments this evening? And there are none. And that brings us to staff reports. The first report is with regard to the shed canteen operations. Manager Hagerman, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
None at this time.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. The council received the report for information as it pertains to the shed canteen operations for the 2025 season. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next report is summary of Love Local Week bag campaign. Ms. Birch, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do not.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wright. The council received this report for information as a summary of Love Local Week in Brighton. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wright.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would just like to say that the bags were really well received. There were quite a few customers that had noted that they were coming and they were quite excited when they saw them in store. So they were happy to oblige with the $30 premium.
Brilliant. Apparently it worked. Yeah, no, good campaign, excellent theme and well executed. So carry on, keep going. Anyone else? All in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Next is a report with regard to the assumption of Orchard Gate Subdivision Stormwater Facility. Manager Gooding, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Through the mayor, no, I do not.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council receive the staff report regarding the assumption of the Orchard Gate Subdivision Stormwater Facility. And further, that council enacts a bylaw to assume for public use all related above and below ground infrastructure, specifically registered Plan 39M 841 Block 24, being the Orchard Gate Subdivision Stormwater Facility. And further, that the current securities held in accordance with the Orchard Gate Subdivision Phase 1 be released. And further, that if required prior to the mayor's signature, the municipal solicitor and the director of planning and development be authorized to make minor revisions to the assumption bylaw as may be necessary to address refinement of attached schedules or to reflect legal descriptions, block numbers, etc. And further, that the municipal solicitor be directed to register the assumption bylaw at the Northumberland County Registry Office and have the authority to revise the bylaw so far as necessary for the purposes of registration. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is the Brighton by the Bay proposed Streetlight project. Manager Blatensky, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, please note that the third proposed streetlight that we're looking at is not 2 mills, it is 2 Sandpiper Way.
Thank you for that. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council directs staff to secure a contractor to assist in a streetlight project for Brighton by the Bay, and that council directs staff to develop a program to review the existing streetlight infrastructure and review intersections, street lighting requests, and plan the long-term budget to fund the program. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. Pleased to see this happening. I wanted to ask, is there a plan to ensure that these are dark sky compliant?
Manager Blatensky.
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor, to Council Wilden, yes, that's correct. We would definitely go with a dark sky compliant streetlight, so 3,000 Kelvin or less. Anything over 3,000 Kelvin would be non-compliant.
So we're not looking like turning our streets into a baseball diamond. It's going to be light enough, bright enough to see, but not so much that like we're blocking out the moon kind of thing.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council Wilden, that's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
I'm good, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. The next is a report with regard to a feasibility study, indoor multi-use recreation facility request for proposal. Director Lennon, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. The council award request for proposal REC 2025-01 feasibility study indoor multi-use recreation facility to Raw Design Inc. in the amount of $33,900. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, this was quite an exercise that our Parks and Rec, or our group went through. And I know, it's not necessary that we always go with the lowest bidder at this, but we did. So I'm just wondering how you justified going with the lower number based on some of the conversation that was had at the task force meeting.
Director Lennon.
Yeah, through the review process, there were several reviewers, 5 in total, including the committee members. In the review, covered the experience of each proponent, their staff experience. Have they done feasibility studies of this nature for municipalities? And generally, most of the proponents had adequate experience. So the RFP review process takes that into consideration. Then the score itself is weighted, and in this case, averaging those scores of all the reviewers, RAW was the preferred proponent based on having adequate experience and demonstrating that they can do work of this nature. And their score was the score for price was also low because they were the lowest bid as far as dollars go.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And just for the public's edification, the score for the pricing was at about 30% of the overall ranking. Is that true, Director?
Through you, that's correct.
Thank you. So it just, I wouldn't say just by coincidence, but it just happens to be that the best scored option was also the lowest bidder in this case.
Through you, we take into account the price. So yes, the lowest or the highest score is also the lowest bid.
Thank you for that. Any further discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next report is with regard to Brighton Dragon Boat docking. Manager Hallam, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing to add.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council receive the staff report on docking for the Brighton Dragon Boat Club for information. Is there any discussion? I can report that I've heard back from some people in the club that they're quite happy. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Next report is Downtown Business Development Area Board appointments. Deputy Clerk Polly, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, stated in the report, but just want to verbally reiterate the great work that the DBIA does for our downtown, events, decorations, decor, and just making the downtown attractive. And just that this report is simply a kind of tidy up and a reflection of how the municipality and specifically the clerk's department can better be a support to the DBIA.
Thank you for that. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council endorse the amendment to Schedule A of Bylaw 035-2023, being a bylaw to appoint various boards and committees of council for the term 2023 to 2026. And further, that council appoint members elected to the Downtown Business Improvement Association of Brighton as detailed in the appointing bylaw. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next report is Docks by the Bay Physician Recruitment and Retention Partnership Agreement. CAO, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
No, Mr. Mayor, I do not.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council approve the agreement between Docks by the Bay Physician Recruitment and Retention Program and the municipality of Brighton to undertake physician recruitment efforts in the municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. I noticed that there is correspondence later on the agenda from Northumberland Health Team, also wanting to do physician recruitment. Does that potentially conflict or add to, I know sometimes being between Bay of Quinte and Northumberland, we get the best of both worlds. Is that what we're hoping for here, or are these mutually exclusive?
CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wheeldon. Staff are continuing to look at our best options moving forward. So originally, this agreement was proposed to staff as a 3-year agreement with the expectation that we're going to come back to council in September with some ideas moving forward on how we best deal with our physician recruitment. We've asked to go with a 6-month contract to have something in place because it did expire the end of March, and then a month by month from there on. I certainly have had lots of conversations with our neighbors in Quinte West, and I think there is some value in maintaining some relationship there, as well as exploring what Northumberland may offer. So while I don't know exactly what we're going to bring back in September, I think we have value on both sides, and it's important for us to look at that.
Thank you both. Anyone else? I will note that in receiving correspondence of what you're, maybe we'll talk about it when we get there. We'll talk about the OHT letter when we get there. Never mind. Thank you for that. Any further discussion on the Docks by the Bay partnership? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next report is a CAO ongoing report, capital projects. CAO, do you have anything to add or highlight?
No, Mr. Mayor, I do not.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland, that council receive the CAO ongoing report and capital projects update as information. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Are there any opposed? That motion's carried. That brings us to notices of motions and motions. The first is a notice of motion, or is a motion that was seen as a notice of motion at the last meeting, and it is moved by Councillor Wright and seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. Whereas the Government of Ontario has recently expanded and encouraged the implementation of strong mayor powers across multiple municipalities, including smaller and rural communities. And whereas the strong mayor model significantly shifts governance authority from elected councils to a single office, centralizing decision-making power in the hands of the mayor and thereby reducing the checks and balances and collaborative spirit fundamental to democratic processes. And whereas the municipality of Brighton values transparent, collaborative, and representative decision-making, where each elected councillor has an equal voice in shaping the future of our community. And whereas there has been no consultation and insufficient justification for the need to impose this governance structure on communities that have not requested it. And whereas changes to local governance should reflect the will of local residents and the judgment of their representatives, not be dictated by unilateral provincial imposition. And whereas the current political climate in the United States highlights the danger of democratic erosion with increasing concentration of power in executive offices and the weakening of institutional checks and balances, they're creating chaos even here in Ontario. And whereas the adoption of strong mayor powers in Ontario bears troubling similarities to the American model of municipal governance, risking a shift towards centralized authority that undermines Canadian democratic norms and empowers populist and polarizing politics. And whereas these changes represent a gradual but dangerous shift that threatens to erode the foundational principles of local democracy in Canada if left unchallenged, therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of Brighton formally expresses its opposition to the implementation or imposition of strong mayor powers in this municipality, and that the Council affirms its commitment to democratic collegial governance and the principle of equal representation. and that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Premier of Ontario, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, MPP David Puccini, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and all Ontario municipalities for their awareness and support. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wright.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just had a few notes I wanted to read. I stand tonight in firm opposition to the implementation of the Strong Mayors Act in the municipality of Brighton and the other 169 or so Ontario communities targeted by this legislation. Let's be clear, this act is not about empowering mayors to serve their constituents more effectively. It is about centralizing control, undermining the democratic balance of municipal governments, and concentrating authority in a way that risks silencing local voices. In a healthy democracy, no single individual should wield unchecked power, especially not in a council meant to reflect the diversity and complexity of its community. The Strong Mayors Act erodes the principle of majority rule and replaces it with mayoral rule. It allows a mayor to override the will of council, dismiss key officials, and push through budgets and bylaws with minimal accountability. That is not democracy. That is authoritarianism dressed up as efficiency. In Brighton, we have a legacy of working together, of engaging in open dialogue, and of listening, really listening to one another. This legislation threatens that tradition by allowing a single elected official to bypass the rest of council, even if the majority disagrees. I will note that this is not likely to happen within this council, but it needs to be noted that it could. This is not just a political problem, it's a philosophical one. Because the moment we decide that it is acceptable to strip power from local representatives and hand it to one person, we have started boiling the democratic frog. We may not feel it right away, but make no mistake, the water is getting hotter. We've seen what this looks like south of the border, where the erosion of democratic norms began incrementally, quietly, until it was too late to stop. Strong mayor powers mimic those American patterns of governance, and for us to remain passive while they are imposed here without our consent is to risk our own civic integrity. Municipal government is supposed to be the level of government closest to the people. This act creates distance between citizens and decisions, between voices and votes, between input and outcome. Who benefits when the mayor can push through their agenda without council's consent? Who loses when citizens' voices are sidelined because their elected councillor is no longer part of the process? The answer is clear. This isn't just about this council or this mayor. This is about every future council and every future term. Once these powers are granted, they will not easily be taken back, and we must ask ourselves, what precedent are we setting? I urge all of you to support our motion to oppose the Strong Mayors Act. Let's send a message to Queen's Park. We will not accept the dismantling of local democracy in the name of expediency. We were elected to serve our constituents, not to abdicate our responsibility to a single office. Let's protect the collaborative spirit that built this municipality and defend the democratic principles that should guide its future. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. Well said, Councillor Wright. Appreciate that. I was speaking with the CAO of Trent Hills today, and she mentioned that their mayor has similarly delegated what authorities he could back to council and staff, and noting that he's not allowed to delegate all authorities and is still responsible for the budget. So I appreciate that that we are not alone in this position. But I do still think about the next term and think about the change of incentives in elections. Already, competitive elections often have a lot of conflicting incentives. And as we've seen, populism is a force to be reckoned with in Canada as well as the US. Having further incentives towards toxic populist political rhetoric and things like that is definitely a negative to our democratic processes and the kind of conversation we can have about politics in this community. And so I really appreciate you setting the tone by being the first mayor in Brighton to have to address these powers and do so by giving back what powers you are allowed to. I think you set a tone, and I appreciate that very much. I hope that a year from now, when people are filing their papers, that they keep that in mind, that the next mayor will also have that choice.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? I would just point out that the powers are not unchecked, that although I have a veto, my veto can be vetoed if I chose to use it, which again, we hardly ever see, I mean, very rarely do we see this council split. Very rarely has it come down to a 4-3 decision. Usually we're fairly unanimous or one or two outliers, which would make a veto ridiculous because we would just go through that quick cycle of the 5 people then overturning my veto. I absolutely see my role as supporting the decisions of council, always have. Will not stop doing that, regardless of whether I happen to agree with the decision made that night. I will always support the decisions made by council. The other, I think, important thing to note is these are mostly around the issues of land use planning and the concerns that we're not building housing fast enough. Again, not a concern in Brighton. I think that if you ask most of the residents in the community, they would say we're still building houses too fast. And so we need to be conscious of that balancing act of continuing down the road we're going in terms of being supportive of development in the community, while also hearing the words that we hear from our constituents about the changes they see in our community. I also want to note that it doesn't give me the authority to push through bylaws. It gives me the authority to bring bylaws to council. I don't think I can just make up a bylaw for fun, right? So I still have to bring it to council for council's ratification and including policy. So there's no real bypassing of council. It's simply vesting a little more policy opportunities in the mayor's office. And again, something I would never do without the consultation and hard work of staff who are the experts in these things that we do. So I appreciate the comments that you've made tonight, both of you. Appreciate the reason for this and the general philosophy and concerns around the erosion of democracy generally that we're seeing around the world, and the teetering on of this as we go down these roads together. I am also conscious of not wanting to be seen to be in opposition to our friends at Queen's Park, that they have a very specific want to get 1.5 million houses built in the province. And whether that's even a remote possibility or not, I think remains moot. That's the intent of the provincial government. And, in sections 96 and 97 of the Constitution, we are children of the province, and we live by that sword. So this is the road we find ourselves on, and the burden, the cross we shall bear, if I can say so. Any further discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that's where some of my concerns are, as you said, with the land use planning thing. Like, how far do we go back and say no to the province that we need to look after our own here in this municipality? And then at some point, how will we be reprimanded? I'm thinking as far as finances go. We've just had a nice gift from the province at this stage, trying to prove that we are building and we require more capacity as far as our sewage treatment plant. But what's the next big ask, and how much pushback can we do? And I have confidence in you as a good messenger to take that forward. But as we say, going forward in the next few years, where will that land?
Thank you for that. And I will note that the CIO and I are meeting with MPP Pecuniary on Thursday morning with the other 3 mayors who have these powers to talk about strong mayor powers. I don't know what that conversation's, I haven't seen the agenda. I doubt I will. I don't know what that conversation is going to look like or what the message will be from MPP Pecuniary, but I will be sure to let you know. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? Go ahead.
Give a recorded vote, please.
You may. Madam Deputy Clerk, a recorded vote has been requested by Councillor Rowley.
Counselor Emily Rowley,
Yes.
Counselor Jeff Wielden,
Yes.
Counselor Bobby Wright,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ron Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor McCausland,
Yes.
Mayor Brian Ostrander.
Because I support my council, yes.
That's carried.
Thank you. I don't know if you heard the deputy clerk, she declared it carried. She could have said unanimously. The next notice of motion upholding environmental stewardship, opposition to repeal of Endangered Species Act within Bill 5 was a notice of motion at the last meeting, and it's moved by Councillor Wright, and thank you. Seconded by Councillor Wilden. I'll note that it was drafted to be seconded by Councillor Butwell, but she's of course not able to join us tonight. So thank you, Councillor Wilden, for getting this on the floor. As follows, whereas Ontario's Endangered Species Act 2007 was designed to ensure the protection of species at risk and their habitats, recognizing the vital role biodiversity plays in sustaining ecosystems and community health. And whereas the proposed repeal of the ESA would significantly weaken these protections, opening the door to habitat destruction, ecological imbalance, and irreversible loss of species. And whereas the municipality of Brighton, situated adjacent to Presqu'île Provincial Park and located along a major North American migratory bird route, recognizes its profound responsibility to safeguard natural ecosystems critical to local and transitory wildlife. And whereas Brighton acknowledges that environmental stewardship is not only a local responsibility, but a national and global imperative, particularly during a time of growing global instability, when environmental regulations in jurisdictions south of the border have been significantly weakened, contributing to biodiversity crises, climate volatility, and ecological degradation. And whereas global environmental uncertainties further reinforce the urgent need for Canada and Ontario to strengthen, not dismantle, existing environmental protections to preserve biodiversity, mitigate climate impacts, and ensure a healthy future for coming generations. And whereas Council believes that weakening environmental protections at this time would be contrary to the values, long-term sustainability goals, and ecological responsibility of the province of Ontario. Now therefore be it resolved that the municipality of Brighton formally opposes and rejects the repeal of Ontario's Endangered Species Act. Council calls upon the government of Ontario to immediately halt all efforts to dismantle protections for species at risk and instead work to enhance and expand legislative measures to support biodiversity, climate resilience, and ecosystem health. Council demands that any proposed changes to environmental legislation be subject to robust scientific evaluation, Indigenous consultation, public engagement, and adherence to Ontario's and Canada's conservation commitments. Council directs that this resolution be forwarded to the Premier of Ontario, the Minister of the Environment, MPP David Pecuniary, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Ontario Nature, local conservation authorities, and all Ontario municipalities. And Council encourages all levels of government to recognize the escalating risks posed by global environmental rollbacks and to commit to reinforcing, not weakening, environmental protections within Canadian jurisdictions. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wright.
Again, a little something to read. Today, I wanted to voice my strong opposition, not so much to Bill 5, which I think there's probably some merits to it, but specifically where the repeal of the Endangered Species Act is taking place. This bill undermines the crucial safeguards that protect Ontario's rich biodiversity and places countless species and puts countless species at risk, further at risk. As stewards of our environment, we have a responsibility to preserve the natural habitats and wildlife that define our province. The Endangered Species Act has been a cornerstone of our commitment to conservation. By repealing these protections, we risk irreparable harm to our ecosystems and future generations. We currently have 16 species that are extirpated in Ontario. This means we've lost them here, but they do exist elsewhere. What that also means is that we failed those 16 species. We have 115 on the endangered species portion of the list, ranging from plants to birds and animals. Which one of these will be sacrificed on the altar of more homes, better, faster? the smallmouth salamander, the barn owl, king rail, piping plover, which is so popular in Presqu'île, or the Pecuniary warbler. Don't get me wrong. I agree wholeheartedly that we need more homes and more affordable homes, but I believe we can do this while sustaining our Endangered Species Act. We must prioritize sustainable development that balances economic growth with environmental responsibility. Let us work together to protect our natural heritage and ensure that the voices of our communities who cherish our wildlife and natural spaces are heard. I urge you all to join me in opposing the repealing of the Endangered Species Act for the benefit of our environment and our future. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Councillor Wielden?
Thank you. And again, really appreciate your comments, Councillor Wright. I wholeheartedly agree. Bill 5 is largely aimed at wanting to develop the ring of fire for precious minerals that could be part of EV batteries and things like that. That is a noteworthy and largely positive goal. Again, what we're seeing here is that regulation and frankly, democratic norms are inefficient. And I mean, that's kind of the point, is that if there's something worth doing, it's worth doing well. And what the provisions of this bill, I mean, taking out the Endangered Species Act is a huge part of it, but they also have other mechanisms within this bill that would allow them to basically create law-free zones where they get to determine regulations carte blanche. Those kinds of things are the things that give me concern, because it suggests that what we do here as a representation of local democracy and the level of government that is closest to the needs of the people and the environments in which we live is inefficient and in the way of provincial priorities. It seems that it feels like we are treated as an impediment to the province doing what it wants to do. And I'm very conscious of not wanting to bite the hand that feeds. And I mean no disrespect to Minister Pecuniary or Premier Ford or anyone else, but it's difficult to read bills like this and not see them as hostile to what we do here and the responsibility that we take on as representatives of the people of Brighton, and that other councillors across the province have taken on. In the past, this provincial government has taken away the role of conservation authorities in maintaining habitat. Now taking away, or greatly weakening, I should say. The Endangered Species Act is being repealed and replaced with a lighter version. These things are steady erosion of the protections that are there. And it's not as though they're replacing what is an absolutely, platinum plated, suits all situations, perfect piece of legislation, or that they're giving greater respect to the judgment of experts or things like that. They're replacing one regulatory regime with just a weaker one. And specifically with the explicit goal of saying we need to do these things faster, we need to take less care to make sure that these species are protected so that we can build. When it comes to developing minerals or mining operations, I understand that there's a lot of hoops to jump through. They're going through quote unquote wild territory. And so I think a lot of care and concern is warranted there in those spaces, that we reduce our impact. We like to think that Canada is a vast wilderness, just absolutely teeming with life, but it's not. The animal populations of the entire world have been cut in half since the 1970s or more, and Canada is no exception. And so we do have, for having more wild spaces, we have more responsibility there. if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And when it comes to the rest of these spaces, the ability for the province to determine under Bill 5 a special economic zone has currently no regulation attached to it. It's carte blanche. It says, well, it must be declared this way. And it must meet certain criteria, but the criteria are not stated. And it just says we can determine the criteria. And so they could, in theory, set a special economic zone anywhere in the province if they have a reason to. And they could say, no municipal laws apply here, no provincial legislation applies here. And so I look right now at the province's desire to develop the Ring of Fire. And, it's pretty far from here. I could probably say, well, we need more EVs. And so, what's this one? But how long before local opposition to nuclear power in Port Hope becomes a problem and parts of Northumberland get designated as special economic zone in order to bypass democratic processes there? What about preserve? I know that the agricultural community is concerned about losing protections on farmland because those could be voided too. Had this been in place a few years ago when the attempted Greenbelt land swap happened, it would have been fully legal. They could have just declared it a special economic zone, place they need to put a highway through or a tunnel, and there would have been no recourse. So checks and balances are important. They slow us down, and that's a good thing. When it's needed, it's definitely a good thing. And we'll miss them when they're gone.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. We have nothing listed under unfinished business, which brings us to bylaws. The first bylaw is the tax rate 2025 bylaw. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland. The council gives a bylaw. It's for second and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to provide for the adoption of tax rates for 2025 and to further provide for penalty and interest in default of payment thereof. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. The next is the Recruitment and Retention Program Agreement, Docks by the Bay. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland. That council gives a bylaw. It's first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute an agreement respecting the partnership between the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton and Docks by the Bay Physician Recruitment and Retention Program. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. The assumption of Orchard Gate Stormwater Facility with a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland. The council gives a bylaw. It's first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to assume for public use all related above and below ground infrastructure installed on Block 24, Registered Plan 39M, 841 being Orchard Gate Subdivision Stormwater Facility. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. That brings us to reports and minutes of advisory committees of council and review teams. The first is an omnibus with regard to a number of advisory committee meeting minutes. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland. The council received the minutes from the following committee meetings as presented: Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee, March 12th, 2025. Accessibility Advisory Committee, March 13th, 2025. Heritage Advisory Committee, March 3rd, 2025. Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee, February 27th, 2025. Recreation Facility Advisory Committee, April 14th, 2025. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. And the next is a recommendation from Environmental Sustainability. It's moved by Councillor Wielden, seconded by Councillor McCausland, that council support the recommendation from the Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee. And the council directs staff to investigate and prepare a policy for ecological offsetting for the official plan update, and that draft policy be brought to the committee for review. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next is a recommendation from the Homelessness Task Force, with a motion moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wielden, that council support the recommendation from the Homelessness Task Force, and the council directs staff to investigate implementing a community communication board. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wielden.
Thank you, Mayor. The idea here is just to have a public place that's very prominent where there's information about how to access resources. This is something that the Sustainability Advisory Committee from a few years back, from prior to this term of council, had suggested and we're working toward. It could be digital, it could be a cork board, it could be anything that allows people to know who to call when you need help.
Thank you for that. And it could include other information as well, you know, as we see the need for communication with the municipality or people of the municipality. Any further discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. And from Heritage Advisory, with a motion moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wielden, that council support the recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee regarding a historical display of the main intersection of Brighton, and that council directs staff to work in conjunction with the Heritage Advisory Committee to produce a historical display of the main intersection of Brighton along the brick wall that encloses the Sobeys parking lot. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion is carried. Oh, another one from Heritage Advisory. That's why I'm getting confused. Thank you. With a motion moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wright, the council support the recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee regarding the designation of the privately owned property at 523 Carmen Road, and that council authorize the Brighton Heritage Advisory Committee chair in conjunction with staff to prepare a formal notice of intention to designate to be sent to the owner. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Has there been already any conversation with the owner of this property?
Anyone from Heritage Advisory? No, okay. Deputy Clerk.
Sorry, I'm happy to let you answer, Councilor McCausland, but I know that you're still new to the committee and learning. No, this is the first step. The first step is to have council agree that yes, we support the committee, and the first reach out is this letter to the owner.
So this is not council designating the property. This is simply providing authorization to the chair of the Heritage Advisory Committee to provide a notice to the landowner, and then we would receive feedback from the landowner through Heritage Advisory and be provided with a formal recommendation whether or not to proceed with designation. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. The property wouldn't be designated until council passes a bylaw designating the property. So that would come at another time.
Councillor Rowley?
If so desired by the property.
That would be up to council. We don't require the authorization of the property owner to designate a piece of land, but I would think in a community like Brighton, we would certainly want to have that okay, and we'd certainly want to have lots of conversation around not going down that road if we wanted to. Yeah. Anything further from members of council? Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And that brings us to reports and minutes of statutory committees, boards, and external agencies. The first is from Lower Trent with a motion moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive and refer the annual watershed monitoring report to the Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee for review and comments. Is there any discussion? Just for your information, Councillor McCausland and Councillor Wheeldon, I have corrected the name of the committee on the motion. All those in favor? There being none, any opposed? That motion is carried. And again from Lower Trent, moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council receive the Lower Trent Conservation Hearing Board and Board of Directors minutes April 10th, 2025 as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. That brings us to correspondence, direction items, endorsements, communications, and petitions. The first comes from Andrea Groff, Executive Lead, Ontario Health Team Northumberland. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council support the request from Andrea Groff, Executive Lead, Ontario Health Team of Northumberland, regarding support and partnership in the next step in physician recruitment. Is there any discussion? I will say that just to let everyone know, County Council received a delegation from Ontario Health Team Northumberland, and our motion was to endorse a county-wide physician recruitment program, but we didn't specifically endorse the Ontario Health Team's version. So we're still working through whether that will be with the OHTN or whether that might get housed at the county. And I think there's more to come. So I'm fine if this council wants to support the OHTN's offer, but may I suggest we receive it for now, because the funds will come from the county, not from this level. Councillor Rowley.
Okay, so that's information that we don't have until you just shared that. So I'm fine to change support to receive until we get further information from either the county or wherever we're going to get it from.
Thank you for that. Council, Deputy Mayor, are you okay with changing support to receive? Yeah, okay. And more information should come shortly as we work through this. It's just a matter of creating who holds the umbrella for a countywide recruitment system. And I believe Docs by the Bay has been going along for the ride here with OHTN. They've been included in the consultations, I believe. You don't know. Okay. I was looking for confirmation. Bobby, pardon me, Councillor Wright, you sit on that. Are you aware of any?
I do. I think that was Andrea that was at that one of the last meetings that we were at, when we discovered that there was some new funding potentially for Brighton. Was that the same person, or am I thinking completely wrongly?
Sale.
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Wright. I wasn't at the last meeting. I don't know if you were there without me. The lady that was speaking about the funding, that was talking specifically about it not being available in Brighton. I don't know if that's the woman that you were speaking of. She was talking about the potential for funding in September for the Hastings side of things. I don't recall direct conversations with the Northumberland side in Docs by the Bay, unless it was at the last meeting that I wasn't at. That's entirely possible too.
I'm just going to be quiet and just pretend.
Any further discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. Okay, so funding. So will that be something, once again, if the county takes the lead, that we will be beholden to them for dollars, or will they do as they've done with some of the other projects? They'll just pay and we'll just ride along.
If either way, well, I guess if the OHTN were to take it on, they could petition the 7 lower tiers to help fund it. And if all 7 decided to fund it, then it might make sense for the county to take it on. But if the county takes it on, that would be a choice, a direction from county council to do so. And I don't believe we would look to the lower tiers to be paying for that. We would do so out of the county levy. Yeah, so that similarly to other programs that have been noted to be countywide, we're no longer invoicing individual lower tiers when all 7 are engaging in that program. We simply create it as a county levied program. You're welcome. But I don't know where it's going to go. Until we know, we don't know. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Next correspondence is a request for delegation for AMO Conference 2025, etc. With a motion moved by Councilor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. The council receive the delegation with cabinet ministers at AMO Conference 2025 correspondence for information. Is there any discussion? So I think what staff intended here is for us to question whether or not we would like to ask for delegation or any delegations at AMO as a local council. I know we're having this discussion at County Council tomorrow, and there are several items that County Council will be seeking delegations for. But if there's anything specific that this council wants to delegate about, I think now's the time to have that conversation. CAO?
Through Mr. Mayor to council. When this information came through and I spoke with our clerk, she indicated normally this just goes out via email to you. So I thought it was important just to have it on the agenda, just to remind you that, you know, AMO is coming. They will be asking for delegation requests. And if there is a priority that is important and this council wants to submit a delegation request, you know, that would, whether it's today or whether you discuss it at an upcoming council meeting, this information is coming out. They will be looking for those delegations, and potentially if there's something that's coming from the county, it could be joint delegations. But I don't know historically that this has come specifically to council. Maybe just hit your inbox as one of the numerous emails that get sent to you. So I thought it was important that you have it, just to put it in front of you to determine if it's something you want to further investigate, but it could be dealt with at another meeting.
And speaking of joint delegations, I think there will be opportunity from county for one on the EDR routes. As an example, it was a couple of years ago, we went to the province and chatted about EDR routes. Crammy and Brighton in the county did. There's some chatter out of Hamilton Township now about their concerns around their EDR routes. So we're thinking, you know, more is better. If we have more folks around the table talking about the EDR routes to Northumberland, the better off we are. I took an EDR route early this morning, late last night on my way home from Toronto. The highway was shut down in Newtonville, and we came in through to Northumberland County along Highway 2. So, Councillor Wheeldon.
I appreciate this being on the agenda because it really flagged my notice. And now the Northumberland Intermunicipal Task Force on Housing and Homelessness is aiming to prepare a delegation request to Minister Flack to talk about those issues. And so I know that our current chair, Todd Atridge, has reached out to David Pecuniary this morning to notify him and ask for his support for such a delegation. But I don't yet know how to actually go about doing that. And so I will be asking our clerks for support in that. I know that at least 2 of us from that task force will be attending AMO and will want to be leading that. So if it's something that has to come from municipalities formally as a joint request, or if it can come directly from the task force, I don't know, but I'd like to find out.
I suspect it has to come through the municipalities. Normally would so, and it might be best to come from the county. So if you would give me some like the tweet version of that, I would appreciate it so that I can bring it tomorrow.
Sure, I'll reach out to the chair and we'll put something together for you tonight.
Yeah, or to Mayor Hankivsky if that's reasonable. I don't know where things are there, so thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to FYI correspondence. The first comes from the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Agribusiness. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council receive the correspondence from the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Agribusiness regarding agricultural system implementation. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Just to note that the Northumberland County Food Policy Council is still working toward mapping the food system in Northumberland County. We met just this morning, still hoping to do that. We're hoping to have a session for that mapping in November. It's moving slowly, but it's really important for our economic development as well as for our food security and the maintenance of our farmland as farmland.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. And from Principals Integrity, a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wright. The council received the Integrity Commissioner's annual report for information. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. And from Northumberland County, a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. The council receives the updates from Northumberland County, May 12th to 23rd, 2025 as information. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
I thought of this earlier and it just reminded me when I've looked this over. So this is Public Works Week. So if we could please give thanks to all of our hardworking staff in the Public Works Department. They are some of our hardest working, I believe. I'm not going to leave Parks and Rec out of that or fire. I'm sorry, but you got your accolades at the last meeting. So thank you on behalf of myself and council. Mr. Lennon, Mr. Blatansky, Mr. Gooding, please share with the rest of your staff that I myself really appreciate all the work you do, and I'm sure the rest of council does as well.
Hear, hear. Anyone else? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, with a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland. The council received for information correspondence from the Honourable Robert Flack, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Protect Ontario by Building Faster and Smarter Act 2025. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Are there any opposed? That motion's carried. That brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the gallery that has questions with anything that appeared on tonight's agenda? And there's no one in Zoom land for that reason. We have no closed session this evening, which brings us to our confirmatory bylaw. Moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton Council meeting held on May 20th, 2025. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a motion moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that the May 20th, 2025 council meeting adjourn at 7:34 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And of course, we look forward to His Majesty's homecoming here on Monday or so. May God save